Well, what is up, all of you Ugnaughts and Jawas out there, and greetings, variants from across the multiverse. This is a Mando Talk Geekverse crossover episode talking about light and magic, a review of the brand new series that just dropped on Disney Plus this past week. It is an incredible documentary series highlighting industrial light and magic, a visual effects and a CGI corporation founded by George Lucas all the way back in 1976. If you've yet to watch this 6-part documentary, you've got to watch it. It's incredible. I mean, it absolutely blew me away. Let's just get right into this. This documentary basically solidifies every argument I've ever had with film fans when I say that you do not get modern filmmaking without Star Wars. I used to ask people, what's your favorite movie? Tell me your favorite movie. And almost always I'd get responses like Pirates of the Caribbean or The Avengers or Iron Man or Transformers. And those are some newer movies, but I would always say, okay, you don't get that movie without Star Wars. And they'd be like, how? Or they'd blow me off completely. Now all I have to do is say, well, go watch Light and Magic and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And so if you're a film fan and you are a Star Wars fan also, all you have to do from now on is point to Light and Magic and say, yeah, this proves my point, that you don't get modern filmmaking without Star Wars. And that's ultimately what Light and Magic proved. But really it reminded me of two other documentaries. One's called Empire of Dreams, and a lot of elements of this documentary reminded me of that one, but also another one that I have a VHS tape of. I'll put it somewhere here-ish. Ooh, okay. But it's called From Star Wars to Jedi, and it's pretty much a behind-the-scenes look at everything from the first Star Wars all the way through Return of the Jedi's making. And there's a lot of information I already knew that was stated in Light and Magic that came from these documentaries. So I would encourage you to especially go watch Empire of Dreams and From Star Wars to Jedi if you can find it. So let's jump right into the first episode, which was titled Gang of Outsiders. This pretty much just highlighted the beginning stages, I should say, of industrial light and magic. At the very beginning, when George Lucas realized he needed a visual effects company to make Star Wars. And since there wasn't one out there that he felt like he could use, boom, he makes his own. And that's what brought us everything we've got from then to now. One of the best things about this episode specifically is the love that was captured by Lawrence Kasdan as he interviewed people who were there at the very beginning. And they talk about the great times and the fun they had and the ability to work and rub elbows with people from different backgrounds. And that was a lot of fun to really watch on screen. I have always loved the 1933 King Kong, and the fact that that was a major element and an inspiration for people like Phil Tippett and Dennis Muren to jump into filmmaking later on and be these people that we know and love from ILM is just so cool to see how that one little thing helped them and spurred them on to become filmmakers. And for me, I've always liked that King Kong movie. So when I think about my love for filmmaking, yeah, it starts with Star Wars, but then when my dad introduced me to King Kong, I was like, oh, this is like how they did it before Star Wars and how it led to Star Wars. And for me, it's really cool to see how that's all being essentially brought into a marriage during this documentary. And it's really cool to watch that, especially in this first episode. And since this episode was really all just about the beginning stages of ILM, it definitely talked about Star Wars in the first few, not in the first few, but towards the end of the episode, it talked a lot about it. But ultimately, it's just about the beginning stages. So let's get into the second episode, where this honestly is the George Lucas episode. And it's titled On the Bucking Bronco, which was just an incredible episode. And like I said, it was the George Lucas episode. If you want to know something about George Lucas's history and who he is as a person, from his earliest stages as a kid all the way up to Star Wars, and even through Star Wars to a certain degree, man, this is the episode to watch. And there were really two moments in there that really stuck out to me that I knew about, but I love that Lawrence Kasdan captured these two moments in Lucas's life in the way he did. The first was the car wreck he experienced as a teenager and how that really propelled him forward to become a filmmaker. And that moment really changed his life. He really dives into that well, and I really appreciate learning that about Lucas. The second thing that I really loved about Lucas's history, especially during that time during making Star Wars, was that episode he had where he thought he was having a heart attack, but it ended up not being a heart attack. It was just the stress and anxiety that came with trying to make everything work with Star Wars, and how he checks himself into the hospital and everything. Man, that was just done so well in this episode of Light and Magic, to the point that I was thinking, man, I knew about these things, but the gravity behind them is just something brand new to me. And Lucas in particular had a really awesome quote that he said, and he basically said that people have come up to him over the years and would ask him the question, what does it take to make a movie look good? Like, what's the secret to making movies? And he said one word: persistence. When you think about it, this whole idea of being persistent is really what does make movies happen. And it definitely spills over into life, and we can talk about that another time, but just being persistent gets the job done, and I think it's incredible that he decided to talk about that. And one final thing I want to talk about with this episode, I love that Lawrence Kasdan didn't make the mistake of using shots of the X-Wings and TIE fighters flying through space at the Death Star battle. He used the original model shots. He didn't use the special edition shots. He made sure to go find the original shots. And if you didn't realize that watching it, go back and rewatch the second episode of Light and Magic, because it's very evident, especially if you compare it to the material that we have on Disney Plus or on a Blu-ray release or whatever you might have of A New Hope. These are the original shots. So it's so cool to see that he kept that in there. Now, the third episode is really the stepping point into the future a little bit, like the first step into the future, I should say, and it's titled Just Think About It. This episode really begins with George Lucas just challenging his people at ILM to think outside the box. People would say, I can't do this one thing, and he would say, no, you can, you just have to think about it. And I really love how that's just a challenge for all of us. When we face different challenges in our jobs or in life or whatever, if we need to figure a way out of it, or we need to figure a way through it, or just figure out the solution, whatever it is, all we got to do is just think about it. And I love that so much. What I really love about this episode a lot is the amount of time spent on Phil Tippett. He talks a lot about what it meant for his life to change, not just because of the work he was doing at ILM, but as time went on working at ILM, he learned about his bipolar disorder and the depression and anxiety that he dealt with. And what he did was he basically used his craft, he used his career as a means to basically have therapy within himself to work out these issues. And I know that even as time goes on, he's probably figured out other ways to work on those things. But at the same time, it's a great lesson for all of us, especially those of us who may deal with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, whatever it may be, to find an outlet, find something that can be therapeutic to help you deal with those things, amongst other things. And by the way, if anybody's watching this and you deal with any of those issues, make sure you find someone to talk to and get help, because those are very important things. Don't let somebody tell you they're not, okay? So we see that very well taken from Lawrence Kasdan, putting that on screen from Phil Tippett's words, and I just very much appreciate that was something included in this episode of Light and Magic. Now let's get into the fourth episode of Light and Magic, okay? This one's titled, I Found My People. I very much enjoyed this episode. I thought it was absolutely incredible because we're seeing a new phase of ILM come into frame. It's a great way to see how ILM began the change of making that change from doing things practically, like all the time, to introducing some CGI elements and really paving the way forward and making things work in a different way. And really, like we said in the previous episode, think about how we can be better. Man, if you've seen From Star Wars to Jedi, that incredible documentary, it does a lot of diving into what it was like at the creature shop during the time of Return of the Jedi. But this does it in just a different way. It really dives in a whole lot more, and we get to see more of Phil Tippett, which is great. We get to see a lot of George Lucas. And one thing in particular that I really love is that John Knoll is introduced, and he's really the bridge between the old way of ILM doing things and the new way, in a sense that he came in and was really willing to do just about anything, but he's still become like this testament and this pillar to what ILM is now. He was there for the CGI things, but he was also there for the practicality of things. And really without him, I think that this bridge that we needed to cross into modern filmmaking, he's one of the people, if not the person, to have made that happen the most. But watching him talk about his story of how he got to Industrial Light and Magic and what it took to become the person he is now is just absolutely incredible. So it's just really awesome to see that he's been introduced here. And again, he's like a bridge from the past to the present. And that leads us into the fifth episode of Light and Magic, which is titled Morphing, with an F, by the way. And if you've seen Light and Magic, you know why that's titled Morphing with an F. This really is the full-blown episode where they introduce CGI into filmmaking. This moment in time had to take place to get filmmaking from where it was to where it is now. And truly, the integration of CGI work was so fast and so intense that it came within a blink of an eye almost. Before this documentary aired and before I ever watched Light and Magic, I never knew about this transitional period in time between really like the end of the Return of the Jedi era to really Jurassic Park. There's a lot of dissension that took place at ILM, and it was a little uncomfortable to listen to, but hearing these people's stories and what it meant to them to see that transition, and for some of them to feel like they've been put by the wayside, it kind of sucks. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if it needed to happen in the way it did, but because it happened, it allowed for certain technologies to come about that we utilize in filmmaking all the time now. What's awesome is that in the 6th episode, we see elements of that starting to come back into filmmaking now. Where we left off in the 5th episode, it was a lot of discussion in Jurassic Park and what it took to make Jurassic Park happen. But Jurassic Park was actually the catalyst that brought filmmaking to where it is now. It's something very incredible to watch, and the amount of time that was taken to make Jurassic Park happen, it's the reason we got a lot of films made in the late 90s and in the early 2000s. And really what you see happening here is this transitional period where, digital technology is really taking off in a way that is making filmmaking just better. I mean, it's making it more clear, it's making it more fun. We're able to do more and see more now in the films that are made. And really what they do in this final episode is they bring it all back to George. I mean, George came and visited the Mandalorian set in 2019, and he saw what they were doing. He saw the volume. He said, this is what I wanted 25 years ago. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure that's what you wanted 25 years ago. But what's awesome, and one of my favorite things that was said in this episode, it was as if we were taking a step back into the past and into the future at the same time, because we're able to use the technology we have now to make movies in a more practical sense. And it shows us that George had this vision from the very beginning all the way to now. And it's just so cool to have watched that come to fruition, especially in just the 6-part documentary. But whenever you watch not just the documentary, but you look at the history of filmmaking and what it took to get from Star Wars to Mandalorian, I suppose, it means so much for the technology. It means so much for us as fans. It just brings everything together in this incredible way, and it makes this series so much fun to watch. Light and Magic is a dream come true for me as a fan of filmmaking. Ultimately, what Star Wars and what ILM have done for me personally is it's made me want to be a filmmaker. Now, I'm not ever going to be a filmmaker. I'm very comfortable in the career I have now as a pastor, and I feel like that's my true calling. But because I get to do stuff like Mando Talk, and because I get to make videos and do little things here and there for my church, I feel like I get to be a part of this filmmaking, inspiration in my life. And I really have ILM to thank for that in a way. I'll have Light and Magic to thank for that in a way, because it just means so much to me as a fan of filmmaking that something like this has come about and it's come to fruition, and I get to point at a thing that you can go watch and say, if you want to know why I love movies so much, watch this series. And I think a lot of us might feel that way too, especially as fans of filmmaking. And so in a way, Light and Magic kind of caused a bit of a cathartic experience for me. It's just kind of funny to think about because, I get to see how much I love movies, and I get to see how these incredible movies that I love so much have been made over the last 40 or 50 years almost. But what it really does for me is it says it's a reminder. It's a reminder often to just go back to that thing you loved once before. Go back to that thing that you enjoy so much. Don't ever let it get away from you. The whole documentary series ends with Phil Tippett talking about his daughter. And his daughter comes to him and says, Dad, I think I'm too old to play with my toys. And he said, no, you're not. Let's grab the camera. Let's go outside and play with them. And I love that as a grown man, he says, no, you're not too old to play with toys. And that's what filmmaking is. Filmmaking is just playing with toys. And I think that's important for us to remember, is that every now and then we just need to have fun. We just need to have fun, and that's what making movies is all about. That's what watching movies is all about. That's what playing pretend, having an imagination, that's what all that's about. And so if we do these things in our own lives and we learn from this lesson of filmmaking of, hey, just have fun, just think about it, do all these different things, I think it really speaks a lot to what we can accomplish in our personal lives, maybe even in our careers as well. Quick little plug. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Mando Talk is growing in ways that we really can't wrap our minds around for some reason, and we are very much appreciative of those of you who keep checking out our content. Make sure you check out our podcast episode we dropped this past Monday. And if you guys ever want to hit us up, follow us on Twitter, on TikTok. You can follow me on Twitter at RebelScumTexan, and let's have some conversations about film and Star Wars. I mean, that's what it's all about. So as we like to do around here, I'm going to give you our 2 send-offs, because this, again, was a Mando Talk Geekverse crossover episode. So I'm going to leave you with, we have spoken, and we will see you on Earth 2.